I created a situation where I split that their character off from the rest to give them an experience of like being off on their own. So then they were able to play. What is it to be like off all on my own? How comfortable do
Oh,
I
yeah.
feel in this role? Like, can I like take ownership of that situation and do I feel empowered by that or do I feel like scared out of my mind? And they discovered like, oh no, that's scary as hell. I don't want to do that at all, ever. Recorded live from a world that needs better decision makers, it's the Roll for Joycast, where we quest in order to play our way to a world of holy wholeness.
I'm your host, Trin, your spiritual companion and therapist.
And I'm your host, Rory, your Dungeon Master Pastor.
And today is episode 4, where we talk about tabletop role playing games and how they can help us figure out who we are and what we're supposed to do.
But first, let's roll initiative and meet the players at the table. So let's roll
Right.
our d20s. Oh, I did all right. I did all right. I got 15.
11.
Okay.
Go ahead.
All right. Well, the backstory question for today is when was a time that you had to make an honest to goodness hard choice that you knew would impact your entire future? And so yeah, hard choice. I have I feel like just made one, which was the decision to leave my call as a pastor at and being a lead pastor at the church where I was serving um, for almost 9 years and start at a new congregation in a new role. It was um, it was a big choice, but it also um, you know wasn't all up to me. Like there was a committee involved and there was all that. I think it was part of it was made easier by in the Lutheran Church how many people are involved in that decision, how much conversation happens. Well, it's not just like any sort of job interview or anything like that, but there's multiple people on the committee, multiple rounds of interviews, in-depth interviews, lots of paperwork. And so, the real decision was the point of like, okay, now it's time for me to leave this. And I think just coming to terms with going into something that felt a lot less like safe or like I knew what I was doing.
Mm.
So it felt a little bit risky, a little bit hard because in my new position, I'm basically mission developer, developing a whole new area of ministry for the church that I'm at, and really starting from scratch and working to build forms of engagement and then Christian community for people that are not engaged by what the church is, you know, doing as is. So that aren't engaged by the standard weekend worship services um, and other things, but people that are desiring a different sort of connection, or maybe like have some church trauma around participating in church, and yet are yearning for spiritual community and the things that spiritual community has to offer. So, um, figuring out how to make those connections. So, yeah, that's kind of my most recent hard hard choice.
It's a big thing.
Yeah, yeah. What about you, Trent? What was a time that you had to make an honest to goodness hard choice that would impact your future?
Oh, well, I feel like I'm right in the middle of going into like the next thing in a very real way. And so
Okay.
like it's very like potent right now of like the change that I've made. And although I made that change like a couple years ago now, it isn't really potent until right now.
Okay.
So I
And that
think,
change was like going into school to train to be a therapist, and
yeah,
that's what
because
you're talking about?
yeah. So a couple years ago I went back to school and I'd been a pastor for 10 years and had been in ministry and that was really I thought my whole life would be there. Like I started ministry and I thought, man, I'm going to retire here. Like, this is what I want to do. I
Hmm.
spent so many years studying Bible and original language and ditched seminary to go hang out with rabbis for about 8 or 9 years.
That's a lot of
Did
rabbi time.
That's a lot of rabbi time and a lot of Hebrew time and a lot of like study through the original context. And yeah, like it became very clear when I was in ministry that where it was headed was not where I could go,
Hmm.
especially as a queer clergy person. And the stance that my denomination decided to take when it comes to LGBTQ people, and the fact that my church was really heavily queer as well.
Yeah.
Um, that was a really hard decision, and it was like right after COVID, and we just made it through that, and the murder of George Floyd, and it was just such a emotional and hectic time. Um, and I think in it I was just getting like, I can't, like, the space for me is being narrowed out.
Mm.
Like, what once was a space where I could exist as I am is quickly becoming a space where I can't. And I had some decisions to make, and there were so many people, because I was a head pastor, that really relied on me. And that really felt like a pressure of like, I didn't want to let all these people down. And we
Yeah.
built something beautiful. We were definitely ahead of our time. But at the end, I had to like make the choice to do what I needed to do. And I needed to not be a pastor anymore.
Yeah.
The structure for me and where my faith was going and all of that was just changing. And the structure of like what clergy are expected to do was just highly unhealthy in the context I was in. And so it's like are on call all the time. You have to be people's teacher, spiritual teacher, friend, therapist, which is so out of your scope.
Yeah.
Um,
It comes with a lot of
yeah, just a lot of,
expectations.
yes, expectations. And then there was just like, where's the space for pastors to be human um and own our humanness? So I left. And I mean, I talked to my church and I was more like, you guys can call another pastor. I'll help you through that process. But ultimately, I think the board chose to close and I helped them do that and remember. And I took some time off, about 2 years of like trying to figure out who I was. Um,
Hmm.
Without that, like I didn't know, which was really like, how can something I do become such a part of my identity, like, and separating that I'm not what I do or produce.
Right.
I'm enough without that. And then discerning like, what was it that I really liked about ministry, and what does this next chapter look like, and what was the right way. And I had been thinking about going back to school for to be a marriage and family therapist for years. And so finally I was like, okay, I'm gonna do this. And yeah, like all the things fell in place and I entered this really hard program.
Yeah.
Because like when you go to school for therapy, like if you're gonna be worth any beans as a therapist, you better be doing your own personal work along with like
Hmm.
learning the things. And so it is not just like I'm learning all these things. It's like I'm learning all these things and I'm very raw because I'm having to deal with all my own shit. Because everybody's got shit. So it's been really like transformative, painful, oh man, and it's very vulnerable because you're in a cohort of people and you're like, here's my family genogram about how all my family is so fucked up. And these are all
Yep.
the patterns and open for discussion. Like
Yeah,
it's
let's all comment on your family.
it's just a wild ride. So anyone who has a therapist, be assured we're tortured thoroughly in the
Okay.
process, thoroughly. And now getting through to the point where I'm going to start practicing. And that's where it's so like potent that it's like, oh, I really made this change and I have put in all this personal work and I've like learned all these things.
Hmm.
And I'm like ready for it, but I'm also like, oh my God, Like it's such a heavy I think I felt like when I was a pastor it was a heavy call
Yeah.
of what they called it. And I feel like a therapist is heavier
Yeah.
because you're actually expected to help people um get to the root of things and why and help them move toward healing and change in a very real way. And what's talked to you is do no harm, and you're just like, I don't want to do any harm, I don't want to do any harm. And it's like it's just it's a big deal.
Yeah.
It's a big deal, and people are telling you the worst things that have happened to them, and you have to hold that. um so I almost feel like a little tricked. Like, yay, I'm gonna change. Then I'm like, oh my God, this is so much worse.
This is hard.
This is so much worse. But also,
Yeah.
I've never been more sure that I'm like in the
In the
right
right spot.
spot. Yeah. And I found my lane, one of my lanes. I was in class and my professor was teaching and we were talking about spirituality. How spirituality is involved in many areas of mental health and like how people deal with things. And so they're like, well, we'd have to refer that out to someone. And we were talking about like spiritual abuse and trauma caused by the church. And it was like, oh, wait, I'm not going to have to refer out.
Yeah,
Like,
you can. You've been
I,
there. You know that language.
yes. And I can help people deconstruct and provide the therapies. And so it's like, oh, this is a lane for me that I am already passionate about and helping people recover from that and helping people hold on to a semblance of faith and reconstruct what they need and what serves them and let go of what doesn't. And you don't have to throw the baby out with the bathwater because I think people encounter very real hurt and trauma in religious institutions. And sometimes the natural response is like, I want to reject it all. But people, I think, sometimes just don't know how to separate out, like, I still want to keep my faith in some different way, but I don't know how to do that. But I have to get away from this.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited about that. So that's my
Well,
story.
there you go. So, now's a good time to dip over into our main topic for this episode.
Yeah. So, how do we make decisions that are true to who we are? Ah, that's a good question.
Yeah. It's the question of it's the to use a spiritual word, discernment. D Discernment is that figuring out not just what's the best choice to make, but it's who are we? How do we know who we are? And then how do we act in our lives in big ways and small ways out of that?
Mm,
And so, yeah, there are um, so many forces in our society that want to impose an identity on us, that want to tell us who we are, that want to tell us what to care about, that want to tell us what to believe. That, you can go through life and not really ever consider that question in a deep way and end up not having a very good sense of who you are. Or you can go through life with a little more self-reflection and wisdom and kind of self-understanding, which I think is work that spiritual directors help with, work that therapists help people with, and that a good spiritual practice can help with. That is an invitation to consider, okay, who are we in the midst of all this world?
I think I think there's a couple thoughts I have about like who people are or knowing who you are versus not knowing who you are. I think I see people, and this is just speaking as, from a therapist perspective, but I think I see people trying to be who they think people need them to be.
Mm-hmm.
And making sacrifices of their authentic self to be uh, what their family wants or what a loved one wants or societal, cultural. Um, so I see that. And I also see that people sometimes just feel lost on like who they are and parts of their identity. And sometimes sometimes people just repeat patterns because of that. And sometimes people really desperately seek who they are. And I think it's a process. I feel like we're always becoming, right?
Mhm.
From like now until we are not here anymore. Um, we're always becoming. And I think like having kind of that like permission to like I'm always going to be becoming in some certain ways, that it's not this like finite thing that's always going to stay the same, gives a lot of permission and latitude for like you don't have to stay the same. It's okay to grow or change
Yeah.
because of like life and different phases. And like yeah, there's just a lot I see around this. Who am I? And I also think it helps when people really think about and articulate values, personal values, because we live by them, whether we speak them or not. But
Mhm.
sometimes we can't be intentional about that if we haven't really put language to it or named it. And so sometimes it's just knowing some of your internal core values
Mhm.
really helps with who are we authentically.
Yeah.
And some of it's a process. So
Yeah,
those
and
are
I
my
think
thoughts about that.
there's like there's an impulse to care about the things, kind of like in a peer pressure sort of way,
Yeah.
to care about the things that we're told to care about, to be angry at the people that we're told to be angry at,
Yeah.
um, you know, to be afraid of the people that we're told to be afraid of, and to cheer for the people we're told to cheer for. That comes from kind of human beings being social animals, and there is like our identities are wrapped up in one another. There's the
Hmm.
South African idea that I am because we are Ubuntu,
Right.
where our identities are all interwoven. And in the United States, we have this really individualistic, you know, mindset a lot of times that we're
Hmm.
each like pure individual actors acting out in the world, but we're not.
Mm-mm.
We're influenced in so many ways, and I think if we're if we're not aware of the decisions that we're making, if we're not paying attention, um, we can be manipulated into making decisions that really don't benefit us at all,
Yeah.
and that are benefiting, you know, other people, that are lining other people's pockets,
Hmm.
and are like degrading our communities and
Yeah.
are degrading our own well-being. I mean, I think about even just something like sitting and scrolling on my phone, you know? Like, there is nothing about that that makes me feel better about myself.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yet it's like, oh, but I want other people's approval on the things that I post, and I wanna like be a part of this community and be in the know and know what's going on and like be a part of the pulse of the world. And like it I get done and I'm like, I feel gross.
Right. I
It's
love your
not like
honesty about that.
it wasn't good for me.
You know, I I am like maybe it's just, because I'm old, but I just hate social media, and I watch a couple videos here and there, but I never post anything. Like I don't care. And people ask me all the time, "Trin, you're just not active on social media." And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm busy living." I
Uh-huh.
I I just um I've just seen it really impact how we connect with other people. And, it's just, do I want to take this picture or selfie, or do I want to be present for the moment?
Right.
I just think, I'm bad. Like social media can be a good thing. I mean, in a lot of ways, but it can also like be a thorn in your side.
Yeah.
And people only put like, look at me, I'm living my best life. But there's nothing, you're not living your best life 24/7 all the
No.
time, happy every time. Like it doesn't really show a reality, and I think that can cause some cognitive distortions, especially in young people. Like my life is supposed to look like this.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, this is supposed to be who I am. And it's like, no, no. That's not even a true representation of who they are.
Right. It's a very
But it's
small piece.
right, it's a very small piece. So it's just interesting about all these like forces telling us like who you should be, what you should care about.
Uh-huh.
It's very interesting. We are living
Yeah,
in interesting times.
lots of companies, lots of political parties, lots of,
Oh man.
all of those other forces that just want to the power that they can, use people for.
Yeah, and I don't think there's any like real like in these we all have big decision moments. There's nothing like out there saying like this is how we deal with big decision moments. It's like it's like a totally kind of different distracting message.
It
And
is.
it's some of the choices that we have to make are really really risky.
Hmm.
Like, when I was trying to figure out what's the next step, this is going to change the course of my entire life. Like I'm stepping out of what I thought I was going to do into something else. And like I think we're on like Rory, that is such a good question. Like, how do we make these huge, like life changing decisions where there's a lot at stake?
Yeah. Because we're faced with those decisions, and you can either engage it and engage in a deep kind of reflective process and carefully walk through it, or you can freeze and you're like, well, I don't know,
Yeah.
and in a way, that's making the decision as well, um, by not making it. Like I went back to school also, here, about a year and a half ago to be trained as a spiritual director, and get a doctorate in that. And I did that. I was on a spiritual retreat, um, multiple years ago, and talking to the spiritual director that I had at that retreat, and one of the things he said to me was like, "Well, you need to set yourself a deadline. Like, maybe by the time you take a sabbatical, like you need to decide whether you're going to go back to school or you're not. And because if you don't ever decide, well, then you're deciding."
Yeah. Yeah. The indecision is a decision, right? So, and I don't think people realize that. They think they're like staying in this neutral place. And it's
Yeah,
like, no, not deciding is deciding.
yeah. It is. The world is changing, and we only have a limited amount of time. So, it's a big, big question of how do we structure our days in a way that helps us make, the small decisions well? How do we tackle the big moments? Uh, and I think I want to take this opportunity to shift us into our Theopoetics segment and talk about how to take this problem of discernment, the fact that, all right, we are creatures that are faced with decisions every day of our lives, big and small, and we get to decide how to confront those, and how do we do that from a way that's authentic to us. So that's kind of the conviction, is that there is a way, that there are ways to do that, and that we can, through spiritual practice of discernment, get in touch with our, the most authentic version of who we are, of who God is, or who the divine is, and then how we can live out of the freedom found in that place where those two meet. But coming at this, because this is a podcast where we don't just talk about spiritual things, but we also talk about play. How can we do that through play? How can we use play itself, and a tabletop role playing game like Dungeons and Dragons as a discernment tool? So I actually got a chance to do this, in my program. We ran a test group last fall, a Dungeons and Dragons discernment group, where I had 5 folks, seminarians and clergy, who were facing kind of a big challenge in their lives, and we got together, and played some spiritually applied D&D, and had a number of sessions where we'd meet for 2 hours, and we used play as a vehicle for exploring the different discernment challenges in each of our lives. And it was a ton of fun. First of all, which, when we get into this work of discernment and like talking about how do we make big decisions, like career changes, or, getting married, or moving across the country, or, any of these big decisions, they feel really heavy and like hard to make. And sometimes that's why we put off making them. But by tackling them within the context of play, it became something that was just a ton of fun to do. And ended up being a very meaningful thing and uh, somewhat effective. Effective in just like we did it, but then talking with people about their decisions, we were able to reduce the amount of decisional conflict that
Mm.
somebody had around their choice. So decisional conflict is it was a scale that rated people like how comfortable are they in making this decision? Do they feel pressured into it? Do they feel like they're likely to change their minds about it? How like satisfied are they with their decision? And then so a high level of decisional conflict would be like, yeah, I'm not really satisfied with that. And on a low level would be like, no, I stand behind this decision 100%. And we took people from being about like 50-50 on their decisional conflict, which was a pretty high amount as a whole group. And we cut that in half. Like for some people, they went from not really being sure about their decision to being like 100% sure, or like 95% sure that the decision that they were making was the decision that they wanted to make. And that was all through play.
Wow. That's like it's a really successful experiment.
It was good. And
Successful.
so what I had them do was we went through um, a kind of a character creation process, and also a process where they were naming the discernment challenges. It's I think part of that is naming the challenge that
Mm.
that they had to face, and we did it in a small group. There was 5 participants, and so we'd meet together, and so they shared their challenges with one another, and we did kind of that session zero where everybody shared their challenges and also got to meet their characters. And then as the dungeon master, then I kind of placed aspects of their challenges within the game to kind of play with.
Mm.
And so there was, for instance, almost all of them involved some sort of vocational change. But there was one character or one of the players. Their challenge was they were trying to decide whether to stay in their current job or to like go off and start a business on their own. And so I created a situation where they were going around in the dungeon, and I split that their character off from the rest to give them an experience of like being off on their own. And so then they were able to play like, okay, what is it to be like when I'm off all on my own? How comfortable
Oh
do I
yeah.
feel in this role? Like, can I like take ownership of that situation, and do I feel empowered by that, or do I feel like scared out of my mind? And they discovered like, oh, no, that's scary as hell. I don't want to do that at all, ever.
So they
And
end up
so
staying.
they did. Yeah, they recommitted to where they were, and they were like, I realized that I'm a support caster was what they wanted. Like that was their role in the party, and they're like, that's actually like my role in my work and how I operate best. Like
Mm.
that's the kind of role that I take on.
You
Um,
know, I wish we would have had this when I was going through training to be a church planter. So they send you to all these like personality tests and crap, and
yeah.
then they tell you like only 3% of pastors can, cut it at church planting.
Oh
And
Lord.
it's like, why aren't we having some kind of like qualifier? Because like people are giving up their entire lives to try to do
Uh,
this super hard thing, and then you get told like only 3% are true church planners and will be successful, and then they also tell you like this will destroy you in ways you can't imagine, and then I'm thinking, this is church.
oh boy.
It was like the weirdest experience. But I feel like something like this would have been helpful at this moment where these people are making these like really big decisions and they're being told these things. And you're like in this big group of people and you're like, okay, 3%, that means most of these people are going to fail.
Uh-huh.
And what would it be like to be put in a position where you could kind of test some of the water in a little bit of a less risky? I just wonder. I
Uh-huh.
wonder.
Uh-huh.
And also, like, I think I would have still branched off and done the thing, But like it still would have ended up the way it did because who knew the world would shut down and like a
Right.
gazillion other things would happen in our state. So, but it just that was I just remember people telling us that and I just thought, "Oh my God, there's so many people in this room that are not going to make it."
Hmm.
And why are we rejoicing in this?
Yeah.
Like it was just the craziest experience. But I just wish I would have like had that opportunity that that guy had to be like, do I really want this?
Right.
Do I
Right.
really
Yeah,
want
and
to do this
that's
huge hard thing? Like,
mhm.
yeah.
And that's one of I think that's one of the gifts that like a role-playing game play can give us is that it is this sort of imaginary space where you're safe. Your career is not on the line. Like if you fail, the worst that can happen is that you're gonna have to like create a new character and tell a new story.
Yeah.
And
Well,
that
yeah. They're lower. They're lower.
the stakes are
It's a
lower.
fictional story. Like if you fell flat on your face, you're gonna be like, oh, I really don't like doing those things.
Yeah.
And then you can make like because I think in our play we kind of bring aspects in of our lives no matter what. Like
Uh-huh.
we can't help it.
Yeah.
So some of those are transferable to be like, I don't know if I really like this aspect. So maybe I wouldn't like it in the real world. But also I feel like honorable mention of like you could have the stuff and you could do everything right, but we
Mhm.
can't control the world around us. And so like sometimes life happens and it becomes a part of your story. But even in those moments you still find out more of who you are.
Yeah. Yeah, you do. You discover who you are. And so, in the play, it wasn't all, there was this taking of bits of their kind of challenges and weaving them into the challenges that they were faced with in the game. But there was also a process of reflection afterwards that we would reflect on how people showed up in play and
Mm.
also like how they were showing up in their lives. And we did it after we kind of went through a process, a social discernment cycle. Elizabeth Liebert shares this tool of a social discernment cycle in some of her books, but it's a way of kind of working through a process of discernment that starts just by noticing and describing the situation. Because a lot of times we jump to trying to make a decision without really paying attention to what all is there, that our decision might be influencing, or what actually is the decision that we need to make.
Mm.
And so we practiced both just like noticing how people were showing up in the game and noticing, what was about their decision. And then there was like the next session, it turned into more analysis. So now that we've noticed stuff, now it's asking questions like, oh, what does that mean?
Mm.
How is power operating there? In the game, how am I functioning within the group? Why am I making these sorts of decisions? Doing some of those make now asking analytical questions about the things that you notice, and then doing the same, like asking those questions about the situation that you're in discernment around. Like, okay, so what's the power at stake here? The what are the values at stake? Doing some of that analysis work. Um, then since this is a faith practice, that up till now, that none of this really feels very faithy. um, it could be a very secular process, but the next step is taking a pause to reflect and
Mm.
pray about it, to look for theological or traditional wisdom, scriptural wisdom, that might have an impact on what the situation is, and then to just pause and pray about it,
Mm.
um, before finally, moving to making a decision and then implementing that decision. And so
Mm.
we took a step and paused at each one of these sort of steps along this cycle to both practice doing that within the context of just looking at it as a game, and you know doing those things just within the little
Yeah.
container of the play, so that you're also you're exercising that the muscle of discernment, and able to like grow in your capacity for intuition and knowing yourself and like being courageous about it. And then kind of, teaching people how to do that process and leading through that process for their, real life challenges.
I think that's really wise to do that because play actually, like in the therapeutic world, we do like lots of like different types of play therapy, and D&D can also be used as a therapeutic tool as
Uh-huh.
well. And so like play actually acts like opens up and accesses parts of the mind and creativity um in a really special way for us to actually be able to process things differently. So like a lot of times when people like come in and seek like therapy in some aspects, it's really easy to kind of slip back into kind of survival brain, and play actually um minimizes the risk enough to help you get out of that part of your brain to really process it from a different area. And it brings creativity into the picture as well. And so I think it's really wise, and I think that's part of why your what I would call your results are clinically significant is because you're accessing those parts of the brain that bring the risk down enough for people to engage with the problem and then engaging creativity and things they might not have even thought of by using play in there. And I just think that's so clever um, and very therapeutic of you.
It was so, it was. Well, and it's actually used in therapeutic, like by
Mm-hmm.
therapists and people, like that's where it's being used. There's books on that. You can go to trainings
Yep.
where they teach that, and it's like using it in a spiritual context is the weird funky thing. Like there's
But it's
not.
really cool
It
like,
is. It's super
because,
fun, and it's meaningful.
and because I think this is where what makes it really cool is because like um our psychology and our mind and our spirituality are very interconnected. Like what happens in our psychological life and our mind, will, and emotions obviously always impacts our spirituality, and vice versa. What happens for us and is significant spiritually also has impacts for us psychologically. So I love how this kind of marries those things together, and doesn't treat it as if it's separate because they're very much impacting one another. So it's just so cool.
Yeah.
And what a great way to really test the water. Answer this. Was there anybody in the game that might have like come up with something really creative um or had like some creativity that they normally maybe wouldn't have experienced just thinking about this through a different lens?
I think yeah, I think for some people, and this was a small group um of people, and so I definitely, like, as I continue to work on my dissertation, I'm going to be doing more groups and more things, and kind of developing this out more. But for this group, people were, I think it helped clarify some decisions uh, more than operated
Mm,
as like a brainstorming tool.
mm,
There was part of like the session zero session involved naming what are the possibilities. Um, and
mm,
so they did, and I don't know if they would have named it all before that, but just the question of like asking people like, what are all the options? We started there. And
mm.
so then they were like, they listed out all the options, and then they had to pick one right away at their first session. And then I had them do that again after the full sessions, and so they did it again. And um, for for most people, they like there weren't any new options on the table necessarily, but there was at least one person who realized that the question they were asking wasn't even the right question.
Oh, that's
And
very
so
valuable.
and so then it was like, oh, actually the thing that I'm in discernment about is I would phrase it this way, and it's a different set of options that I'm
Mm.
wondering about.
That's wisdom right there when you're realizing that you're asking the wrong question,
Mhm.
because that provides a lot of clarity is like you're not going to get the answers that you seek or the I don't like the word answers, but like you need a better question
Right.
sometimes to get more clarity. And you don't really realize that you're not asking the right question. So it's like, oh, I really need the answer to this, or I really need some clarity on this.
Mhm.
Um, I feel like answer is just such a finite thing. I think sometimes all we need is some clarity.
Yeah.
But yeah, that
Yeah,
is
I
so
think
cool.
yeah, it was. And the last little note that I want to share on it is there was I measured people on there was a few different scales, and one of them measured uh gave a measure of people's courage. And
Mm,
people, like every single participant, ended the mini campaign that we had, um feeling more courageous than when we started, and it was like an average of 10% more courageous. And
wow.
every single person had an increase in their courage. And I think playing, and where you are playing as a person who goes out and takes, acts in the world and does things and makes stuff happen and solves problems and helps people, and exhibits courage in the face of danger, that there is that helps, and that courage is part of what helps us discern, because you can't just know what the options are. You can't just uh, define it and kind of connect and make sure that you those options are connected to your values. But then you have to have the courage to actually make a decision and go
Yeah.
for it.
Yep. And that can be the scariest thing is like the courage to make big changes. Cause
Mhm.
you can kind of get frozen there of like, ugh. And to
Mhm.
have that bump of like, no, I can do this. Courage and believing in yourself matters a great deal when it comes to like making big transitions and big decisions, and how you approach things really matters. So
Mhm.
that's really neat. 10% again is clinically significant. Like I am 10% more courageous to like I think I can do this.
I can do it.
Um I would wonder what a great follow-up piece would be is like following up with them on like how their decisions went, and like
Mhm.
like how that courage played out. Um it would just be interesting to see like where they're at now
I would.
after. Yeah, it'd be so interesting. I always wonder like what did happen.
Right. Right.
Like
Yeah.
I think
Well,
it'd
and
be
I think
cool.
about it. I mean, so we're recording this at the kind of second half of June, Pride Month, and I know, like, part of one of the ways that people use play, and we've talked about this on a previous podcast when we had Alex on as a guest,
Oh, yeah.
was around like playing out your identity and like
Yep.
testing out different gender presentations, different
Mm-hmm.
sexuality presentations, different ways of, kind of presenting yourself in the world, just as like a personal kind of pondering that question again, which is a question of discernment. Who am I? And how do I want to be in the world? And that
Right.
people do use, like Alex, they use the game as kind of a space to practice being more fully themselves.
Oh
And
yeah. And I would say too that like not only do people use it to like discover those parts or play those parts out, I would say that I've used the game as a queer person to just deepen out who I have discovered who I am. Like, how
Mhm.
does that feel to live fully into that? And I think with some people that, because of the world we live in, like not all of us have supportive family of who we
Mhm.
actually are. And to play a game where you can just be openly yourself in a party that um, accepts that can be
Mhm.
just a really sweet space for people to just test this out, live into their fullness. I think I was playing a game one time and we were standing outside this tower, right?
Okay.
And we were getting ready to go into this wizard's tower, and I knew like we knew shit was going to go down. Like I had this compass that points away from danger, and like and points like this other arrow at danger, and it was like dangerous. Like we were going to go into some shit.
You knew it was there.
Like into it. And I remember being there like with this group of friends, And I was playing this paladin, and I was just like, I really wanted it to be like this suave, like charismatic, Prince Charming. Like everybody loves me. I'm just
Mm.
wonderful. Like I was playing that kind of, but very queer
Okay.
and
Queer Gaston.
queer Gaston. Um, but it was, and I was just like flirty and charming with everybody. Like that was just, it was harmless, you know. It was kind of like the, queer Disney prince that I've always wanted. Um, but I'm sitting outside this tower and we just like are trying to battle plan, right? And all of a sudden I just start braiding my really long elvish hair. And my friend jumps in and starts giving me a facial as we're planning. And I was just like, and there's just all this weird crap going on. And we were just like singing all these weird songs, like planning what we're going to do once we get into this tower. And I just paused for a second. I was like, oh my gosh, this is queer AF.
Uh-huh.
And I am just loving the fact that like all these people are just in this with me. And I'm just like, just
Yeah.
letting it all out. And it was
Yeah.
just fun. But it's just like those moments where you're like joined in the game and you notice that, like, yeah, this character isn't me. I'm not an elf and I'm not a, knight, paladin. But there's parts of myself that were reflected in that moment of like, yeah, like I have to rein some parts of me in because other people. And um that
Yeah.
gives freedom and like more discovery of like who you are and courage to be who you are. um
Mhm.
but the game can be a really cool place.
I can. Yeah, and I think it's the way that play can get us into that place of freedom, of that like where our spirits feel free to just unself-reflexively like just be, and you just end up braiding hair or doing whatever. You make a decision and you go with it, and you're just playing into that and experiencing the game and just kind of entering into the flow of that, and you're in this freedom space, and that's the space that we really are called to make our big decisions from as well. It's not a space of expectations. It's not a space of, well, this was the plans that I had set, but it's really a space, or what's being asked of me by a community. But it's a space of like, in this freedom, can I have enough freedom to know and to choose really the right choice for me?
Yeah, and
And so,
one that is like authentically me and that I can feel good about.
yeah. Well, I think we want to probably get to wrapping this up. But before we go, I just want to remind people to check us out. We do have a retreat coming up, the Holy Rollers retreat in October, where we are going beyond the gates of the strictures of our world that tell us that we have to be a certain way, and exploring the gifts that diversity has, to bring us into sacredness and into community. And so that's happening this October. You can find details for that at roll4joy, the number 4 joy.org. You can also find us on Instagram and Threads and other social media places, Blue Sky, and on Ko-fi, if you want to support the podcast or this work that we do at Roll for Joy.
Wow. And
And yeah,
is there another place people can find you, or is it just through the Roll for Joy stuff?
well, yeah, you find me, I mean, doing my ministry at Prince of Peace in Burnsville, popmn.org is the address for that. And uh, and what about you?
Yeah, I am not as cool as Rory, so I don't have like multiple buckets going on. You can find me at seekhealgrow.com. So I do spiritual guidance and I work with people that have experienced trauma by religious institutions or from the church, and helping people deconstruct and discern and some other things too. So feel free you can email me there. You can inquire about all the different things that I do there, and you can book time, but that's where you can find me.
There we go. Well, that's it for episode 4 of the Roll for Joycast. So remember, folks, journey together
Find the fun.
and hold on to hope. We'll
See
see
you
you
next
next
time.
time.